Adventure Ho, Illumineers. Welcome back to the DuckTale Dads, a Lorcana podcast. I am again one of your hosts, Mack, joined by Nathaniel and Ryan. This is our post-Set Champs Week 3 for Set 7 episode, so we'll dive a lot into that. But first and foremost, one of our favorite segments, What's New in Your World? Nathaniel, let's start with you this week. What is new in your world?
Well, the biggest thing is probably Set Champs weekend, but I'll save talking about that. So I always do the Lorcana and the personal life thing. So I'll save the Lorcana piece for a little bit here as we discuss our experience at Set Champs. The personal life thing is the town that I live in does an annual junk day every year. And you can put big bulky items. You just put a bunch of stuff, old kids' toys, all this stuff at the end of your driveway. On day one, everybody kind of goes around, kind of picks at other people's piles if they can recycle things. Great. So then you get to reuse as much as possible. And then on the second day, all that junk gets picked up by a ginormous trash truck and off it goes. So it is my annual opportunity to get rid of the super heavy, big, bulky items that I'm like, get this out of my house. It's amazing. I look forward to it every year. It's awesome.
Sounds like
incredive.
Yeah, definitely a small town thing because you're kind of in the boonies a little bit. They would never do it in the thick suburbs of where I live because there's already too much to get rid of anyways. But that actually sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I learned about it my first spring here 2 years ago and was just like, hey, what is this all about? And we were kind of scrambling as we figured out what it was like the day of. So we just got rid of like a couple things. Now that we know it's a thing, we like prepare for it. So like my old treadmill, I'd like, disassembled it and like piecemealed a couple pieces, but like the frame of it's just so huge and heavy. You can like pay hundreds of dollars to have somebody come and haul it away, or you can do what I do and just put that in my driveway on junk day. It's amazing.
So might I ask what the junk was this year that either you got rid of or picked up from someone else's junk pile?
So we try to be very intentional about not adding more than we've gotten rid of. The only thing I picked up was there were a couple of like brand new like circular saucer sleds, like plastic ones for our little guys. And I think there was like 3 of them in a stack that looked pretty much unused. So that was awesome because my guys love sledding. And that's the only thing I picked up. We got rid of like a huge ottoman, little Tykes basketball hoop that was kind of in terrible shape. The frame of the treadmill, water hose roller that was broken. I mean, just so much big item stuff that I was just like, this is cluttering either like the side of my house tucked away or like in my garage. I mean, the garage, you guys, looks fantastic right now, thanks to Junk Day. So thank you to my town for the annual Junk Day.
Love it.
That's amazing.
Love it. Ryan, what's new in your world?
What's new in my world is that we had our sprinkler system turned on today on one of the coldest days in like this like 4-week period, either 2 weeks before today and 2 weeks after today. I think today is probably going to be the coldest of them all, and we got it turned on because that's when we had it scheduled. It had a few heads that need to get replaced in our sprinkler system, but it's on. Maybe it'll run. I don't know. If we get enough rain, I might just never turn it back on. But at least it's functional and it's operational. It's ready to go when I do want it. Mac, what's new in your world?
Yeah, what's new in my world? Mine's also an outdoor item. Piggybacking off your sprinkler system, I turned mine on last week, but I am now realizing after that really hot week we had like a week ago, what spots of my sprinkler system aren't catching my lawn, and those are just completely brown. I have the most patchy yard right now, really green and luscious part of the yard, and then super brown and patchy. So I got to readjust that next weekend. The other thing too is I started picking out all the weeds in our garden to prep for planting next weekend. That's my big Memorial Day weekend activity. Is we're going to start planting some of our vegetables for our garden. So that's the plan, and that's kind of what was new in my world was prepping that garden. I do have one little Lorcana thing. Advice: when you prep for Set Champs, get comfortable with your deck. I'll leave that as a little hint based on what I ran. A lot of learnings as we'll get into it, but overall enjoyed my deck, but I wish I was a little bit more prepped with it, as there were probably some plays to be made out there that I could have made and should have made, and it was just for a lack of preparation. So that's my advice: get prepped when you're preparing for Set Champs, for sure. Let's get into it. let's talk about week 3. This was our crew that all 4 out of the 5 of us were able to make it to a set champs at this store together, which was kind of our goal that we set out for ourselves in our group as we started this set champ season. We, as a group, roughly did pretty well. So let's get into the results a little bit. We're going to do it a Swiss knockout and finals. Just a little bit of a tease for the audience members. One of us did in fact come home with the champion mat. So we'll get into that as we go out throughout the different stages. So let's talk about the Swiss round. Daniel, maybe let's talk about, we had 3 rounds of Swiss. So you can talk about your different matchups. I'll give you free reign here. What do you want to go through in your 3 specific Swiss round matchups before we cut to top 8? This was a 16-player field, just for our audience. They did 3 rounds of Swiss, and then they cut into a top 8 for the knockout stage. So, Nathaniel, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think we each talk about our first round matchup, and then we'll kind of go each round kind of thereafter. So yeah, unique situation with the 16 player cap due to space limitations at this particular store, and then the fact that they do a top cut to 8 from 16 is a little bit unique, right? Not every store does it that way. So I was actually very glad that we did it that way. I prefer a larger top 8 cut to give people the opportunity to keep playing. I think it feels really bad to be like a 3-1 player, for example, and bubble out at like 5, right? In like a 15 or 16 player field. So I think I like that format personally. So yeah, you kind of knew with 3 rounds that every round you can afford a loss, but it's a lot more pressure now after that. Right. So round 1, it wouldn't be a set champs if I didn't have a purple steel mirror. So I ran my purple steel build that I ran the first week that I did set champs, which would have been set champs weekend 2, where I lost in the semifinals. I ran that same list with a couple minor tweaks, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I'm sure. And I was playing against a player who had kind of used mainly like newer cards. So I think nothing from sets 4 or prior were in this deck. So because of that, right, it just wasn't the most optimal build, I think, right? In terms of what purple steel is able to do when you are able to have access to all the cards from all the sets. But it was a fairly straightforward game. I think I tried to operate as most efficiently as possible, making good trades, and then when I could kind of go gas pedal, quest out pretty quickly, kind of turn the game, and then make my opponent kind of turn into more of the control player late as I started going wider with my board, with a little bit more of a slightly aggressive kind of mid-rangey purple steel deck. So round 1, I was able to win 2-0. And just had I think one of the things I always try to do, win or loss, it's harder to do after losses, I think, but I always try to like chat a little bit with my opponent if they are showing the body language that would suggest that is a good idea, right? Like you don't want to talk to someone and like chat them up after you've just like beaten them bad if they're clearly in a bad mood. Like I think it's fair to be a little bit in your feelings if you lose, and not want to chat it up with someone who just beat you. That's totally okay. But I feel like usually it's in the game I'm really competitive, and then once it's done, I shut that off and become a little bit more bubbly, maybe would be the word. And so I was able to chat with my opponent, kind of ask him, his thoughts on his particular build, and he actually was using the Restoring the Crown, the purple steel action, where you exert all your opponent's characters, and then every time you banish them on that turn, you gain 2 lore. And it's a card
hear that. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
'Cause I've been wanting it to break through.
It's a card that really excited me when this new set dropped, and I would just love to see it work in a deck in some capacity. Maybe it will one day, but that was really cool to see that card in a deck build, even if it didn't. Unfortunately, it didn't get used, right? Because the game was pretty much over by the time we were at 6 ink. So, that was just a cool card that I think that came up in that particular match. So won the first round 2-0 and kind of looked across the table to see how everybody else was doing. And Ryan, how did your first round go?
First round was a major grind. Game 1 took, I think, 35 or 40 minutes. just for game one, and that was we made it through our entire decks. I was playing Amethyst Sapphire, or Blurple, as it is more commonly known as, which is a bit more of like a control and draw heavy deck. And I faced off against a really cool Amber Steel Song build that really capitalized on maximizing the value of the discard pile. And they had the really interesting Kristoff card that has you pay one less ink for the number of songs in your discard. And they also had the Chernobog card, which you pay one less ink for the number of characters in your discard. So it was really interesting that they were able to leverage the value of discarding through Whole New World and challenging on board and all that jazz. To then play large characters for free and kind of have those type of board swings. And we got down to the end of game one is the most interesting because we got down to it. I think my opponent had 8 cards in their deck, and I had 13 cards in my deck. They played a whole new world, so they drew 7 of their cards, and they had 1 card left on the table, uh, face down in their deck, and I had 6 left in my deck, and he had a count on my deck, and so I just quick shuffled in, or quick not quick shuffled, but I just counted the remainder of my deck as well, thinking like, oh, great. Here I go. I'm going to get decked out because I think that that was his third whole new world that he had played, and so I was thinking surely he has 4 if he's playing this like discard package or this discard heavy uh, Christoph Chernobog package. So I'm just like dreading it, thinking like, oh no, here it comes. He has enough on board to like he has enough ink to play it. Like this is it's over. I lose after a 40-minute slog through this control versus control matchup. And turns out the last card that was face down ended up being the whole new world that he was looking for potentially. I never really went back into the discard to really count out the number that have been played yet, but got out of that one. Was able to quest out on that following turn, where I still had 6 cards in my deck. Which was really cool because he had actually was able to play it where if he would have played the whole new world because he had played Chernobog first and then shuffled all of his characters back in, that if he would have played the whole new world, I would have decked out and lost because if you cannot draw a card when you're supposed to draw a card, you lose the game. And then he would have had like 30 cards left to draw through, so he would not have lost in that situation. So that was a really interesting end to game one, and I don't think I've ever played a game quite that long when we were both playing relatively quickly, not really methodically thinking through everything. Obviously, we were taking our time. It was a competitive environment and a competitive match, but at the same time, we weren't like we were on a timer and we knew we were on it. We both knew we were on a timer, and we both realized we were going to be in this game for a very long time. About 15 minutes into the game, we're like, oh, I think we're at like 5-3, and we're still fighting for board, and we're just drawing cards, and yeah, so it was a really really cool deck, and I was really interested to see it in play because I'd actually seen it once before on a stream that I'd watched on YouTube a month or two ago from a Ravensburger employee that had played it. And so after the match, I asked my opponent, like, so where'd you get the idea for this? Because I've only ever seen it one other time, and I thought it was a really cool deck. And he said, yeah, he got it. That Ravensburger employee, I believe, I had actually posted it on a Discord channel or something, and so he had picked it up from there and then refined it and kind of tweaked it to make it and optimize it a little bit more. And it was a really really cool deck, and I was able to, as Nathaniel's probably on his third water bottle of the first round. I am still in my first game. While he's just sitting back with his arms crossed, having a chit chat with his opponent for half an hour. And so was able to come away with the win in the game one, and then also came away with a win in game two. I think that my opponent didn't quite hit the same sequence of cards that they needed to hit in order to make that as long of a match. And I think we were both playing pretty quickly at that point too. So I noticed myself making a couple of sequencing mistakes, and I'm sure there was some across the table too. I'm not as familiar with that deck and what needs to be sequenced appropriately, and so nothing really came to mind in the moment. But I know that we were both playing pretty quickly in that second game just to make sure we kind of try to get through it. Especially, I'm sure that my opponent was feeling a little bit of the pressure that I was a little bit relieved from, because at worst I could get a draw, and at best I could get a 2-0, and they were just trying to fight back for a draw. So they were really, I'm sure they were stressing a little bit, and it kind of came through a bit of their play as well. They were kind of playing really quickly, and I'm sure there would come some mistakes that happened as a result of that, which is inevitable because we're all human. But it was a really cool match. Like I said, I'm there to. I appreciated the deck for how unique and cool it was, and I also appreciated the opportunity to, to play. That's what we go for. I go to set championships so I can play Lorcana, and I'm not mad about it if I end up playing for 45 or 50 minutes of the rounds, because that's what I'm there for. Make sure I get my food and fluids in between and take a potty break, and then come back and play another 40 45 minutes of matches as well. So it was really cool to have that experience, and I think everybody, both my opponent was like, man, that was a really cool game. That was like so much fun. The like judge, because we were like right next to where the judge was sitting, was watching us and was like, dang guys, that was a really cool game. And I can't believe it came down to like that one card. So it was cool to be part of that as well on that day. Mac, how did your round one go?
Yeah, before I get into that, you could tell we're dads when we describe going to the bathroom as a potty break. People with young kids can sure relate to that. I also went with an amethyst steel deck, as I hinted and talked about in a previous podcast. But I went the Jafar wheel route. So if people aren't familiar, it utilizes the 7 cost amethyst Jafar, and that is an evasive character with every on your turn when that character is exerted. For each card you draw during your turn, you gain a lore. So it works really well with a whole new world. So if you exert to sing whole new world, you can gain 7 lore right away as you're drawing 7 new cards. That's kind of the identity of the build. So
Quick question.
yeah,
Jafar wheel route, is that a football move?
I wish.
Sorry, had to make the joke. Sorry to our
There
listeners,
you
that was
go.
very cringe.
As we're football fans here, that made sense to me. But we'll see. Maybe the concept will come out in the next Vikings football season. But anyways, I played against a puppies deck round one. So Amber Sapphire is where we see a lot of the puppy cards and Perditas and Pongos and all those. 101 Dalmatian build. And I think every single card in my opponent's deck was 101 Dalmatians, no filler cards. So that was very interesting to see. I've always been interested to see a puppies deck, and I'm glad I played against it. The really unfortunate part for my opponent was on game one, I was on the play, and within my deck, I had the Robin Hood shift line up into Champion of Sherwood, and I started with that on turn 3. I was able to shift Robin Hood on turn 3, and that Robin Hood just easily took over the game early, gaining 2 lore for every challenge on the poor little puppies. So I eventually took over the game. On game 2, when I was on the draw, it was a little bit more challenging because with the puppy deck, you can get a little bit more of a wider board. But at one point, they played the new Perdita card, gives all your puppy characters ward. So at first, I was nervous, but I luckily had a Zeus in my hand. So although the puppies all had ward on the board, Perdita didn't, because it's not a puppy character. So I Zeus the Perdita. And then again, I had it at that stage in the game. I did have a Robin Hood on. And then finally, I started taking over the game with the Robin Hood. I didn't get the shift line off for Jafar, but I utilized the new set 7 Jafar that gives Challenger +2 quite a bit. And I kind of just overpowered the board at that point, and then eventually quested out the wins. I also went 2-0, but it was very fun to see that thematic puppy deck. Very much enjoyed playing that against my opponent. So we all started off 2-0. So we moved into the winners bracket or the winner's side after round 1.
Puppies deck sounds really cool, and I think I faced a similar puppies deck in a multiplayer format. I think I mentioned it on a previous podcast, maybe not, but if you forget about that or you can't deal with that board, it does get out of control. There's a lot of synergy, a lot of layers to it, and it's really cool to see when it does work. And you can kind of see the pieces fit together as you're picking apart those poor little puppies with Champion of Sherwood.
Yeah, at one point it was too late in the game where it really didn't matter because I had a wide enough board to just quest out. But the new item that came out in set 7 that gives all your puppy characters like +2 willpower or whatever. I forget what the name of it is.
Canine Crunchies.
That's what it is. At the end of the game, there were 3 of them on the board with 3 puppies. So they were just completely willpowered out. So at that point, I just focused on the questing route. But yeah, that got a little dicey and overwhelming on that game too. But yeah, like I said, at that point, I was already at 15, 16 lore and just was quest out on my next turn, thankfully. But early on, that Champion Sherwood pretty much stole the show for my round 1. Round 2, At this point, we none of us saw each other. Oh wait, did you guys see each other in round two? You did not. So let's get into our round two matchup. Who wants to start on this one? Let's maybe go the opposite way. I'll go first. Round two, I played also a kind of a Steel Song hybrid. So whereas in Ryan's explanation, it focused on discard with characters and songs. This version was very much a little bit more of an aggro version, but utilized Rapunzel's tower location. So by having these smaller characters that quested a lot, like Daisy and Lawrence, and kind of that aggro style, move them to Rapunzel's tower, and then +3 willpower for the character there. So it got pretty tough. This is where I went to all three games. I won game one. On that game, I was able to pull off the Jafar shift, and that closed out the game for me, if my memory serves right. So that was really satisfying. I think my one goal in terms of gameplay was to pull off the Jafar wheel and sing A Whole New World. So that was really satisfying.
Kudos. That's
Um,
not easy to do. I'm glad you're able to pull it off.
yes, it was. I I mulliganed a big Jafar, and thankfully I drew into it later in the game, along with the Whole New World. So it definitely worked out. And what also worked really well that specific game is I had Jafar and Genie on the board, and I also had like all four of my lamps show up. So I kept bouncing their characters with Genie, and then I kept drawing two cards because I had a Jafar on board based on the lamp's ability. So that was very satisfying as well, and then just closed it with the Shift Jafar. Game two, I lost on the draw. The aggro style just kind of overwhelmed me. And then game three, it was very much the same. I got overwhelmed. I did not hit any Robin Hood shift line and did not see any genies, which I think is very much what I learned throughout the day is genie is very important for me to play on turn four. Just keeping the consistent board presence and that aggressive nature that Genie tends to bring with the questing for two. So that's a kind of a finding and a learning on what I can do next utilizing this deck again in the future. But yeah, after that, I just got a little overwhelmed with not finding the Genie. And then the one time I had a baby Jafar on board, I got sniped immediately with, I think, a Storm Rage on. So wasn't able to pull off the shift line. It was a fun match overall. It was nice, again, to see a different style of Steel Song. So at that point, after round two, I was 1-1 going into round three of the Swiss. So Ryan, how did your round two go?
Round two, I was paired up with a Sapphire Steel player, and it was a little bit more of the Kiwi Birds or the aggressive version that was going to quest out really fast and strong with tempo plays on a one cost on one, a two cost on two, a three cost Alice on three, and then bodyguards and things to maximize the value of that Alice there from there on. The deck also had some flavoring of like ramp in it too. They had sails and T-boats, and then they also had like Lady Cluck and some big things to help protect the aggressive questers as well. So really cool spice in there that I was not expecting to see in a Sapphire Steel deck. And I got to chatting with the guy afterwards. Sorry, I'll take a step back. I won 2-0. I was on the play and then on the draw. And I was able to really, to maximize and aggressively control and force interactions with the board where I could to minimize the impact of Alice when it did come down. And then when he turned Alice sideways, was just able to pounce on it and take it out. So it only got to turn sideways once rather than being able to repeat over and over and over with its aggressive lore gain ability. So I was able to 2-0. Really, and it was a really nice guy. I really enjoyed talking with him and chatting with him afterwards too. Um, Talked to him about the deck and was like what his thoughts were on it, and he said like, yeah, like if I hit the perfect thing and I get to ramp into these and I get to like Alice plus me, and then that's what I'm really shooting for on turn four if I get to ramp into it. um like, yeah, that makes sense, sure, that's really cool. It just feels like you're doing a lot of different things. And then he was like, yeah, I also want to try out this other deck that I have. We got done I think in like 15 or 20 minutes in that round. And so I was like, yeah, or maybe it was 30 because we still had like 25 on the clock. So I was like, yeah, sure, go grab another deck. We can play one game and see how it goes if you wanted to test against something, because I know as dads how valuable playtesting time can be. And we had 25 minutes before the next round. It's like, you know what, if we start a game by 20 minutes on the clock and we end it by 10 minutes on the clock, I'm going to be happy and fine with that. And he's like, yeah, that won't be an issue either. I'm going to win fast or I'm going to lose fast because it's another aggro deck. And it's like, okay, perfect, let's run it. Let's run it back. And so he was talking to me about that deck then and said like, oh yeah, I just picked up pieces that I wanted to shuffle into it, but I haven't had time to really sleeve it up. And understandable. Life's busy. You don't get a ton of time to get into the hobby all that often. So this might be the only time he had. So I was like, you know what? If you have him in the car, I'll wait 5 minutes and we'll play it then. And he's like, yeah, sure. Let me go see if I can find it. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to find the cards he wanted to replace and move into the deck. But we played the game anyways, and talked through kind of some of the opportunities there. So it was a nice little opportunity, a bit of a brain break, I guess, in a way of like, I'm still playing my deck, but I'm also like analyzing things from his point of view and kind of thinking through the eyes of a different player and kind of what I need to do or what I want to do, and then offering up my insight or my perspective on like when I'm playing against your deck, what am I worried about seeing? Because this is a deck when we went to this store, a couple months ago now, just on a random like league day for some playtesting. I had played against him, and the second deck that he brought up, the playtest deck, was the deck that he had playtested against me on when I was playing a different deck that day that we went previously. And so it was cool to see it kind of come back and play against it with a different deck, and talk through some of the changes he wanted to make to that deck too. So really nice guy, great community member in that area, and so really excited to kind of see where that deck develops and where that deck goes, because I think it is set up very well post rotation in set 9, because it is a Amber Emerald like hyper aggressive deck. He runs things like Shere Khan, which is the 4 cost 4/4 that quests for 4. I think you discard your whole hand, and his goal basically is to have a Shere Khan in his opening hand, and then play so many 1 and 2 drops that by the time he's on turn 4, he has nothing left in his hand, so he just gets to play a Shere Khan for free with no drawback. But then obviously there's the like, okay, but then what do you do if that gets answered? So then he was talking to me, and one of the things the card that he had just picked up a playset of was the Big Clarabelle, and so he was going to slot that in as like the card draw option to kind of like facilitate and get to that as a Shere Khan more as an end game rather than a turn 4 play. But yeah, it was really cool to talk to him, really cool to chat with him again and see a familiar face from a previous visit to the store, and match up in a setting. And I think he ended up making it to the semifinals, if I'm not mistaken. So kudos to him for performing well on the day. Nathaniel, how'd your round 2 go?
I played a really interesting locations build that was an amber steel locations build centered around oh my gosh, you guys, what is the location guy that gets he gets resist and
John Silver.
John Silver, yes. So centered around John Silver, Fix It Felix to get some card draw when the location was down, and then it had the key to shift line, and it was just a very heavy location. So it had 100 Acre Woods, it had the Dwarven Mine, and it also had Neverland in it. So some cheap locations to get down, get some lore pressure kind of early to your opponent to try to clear those locations while you start to get more and more characters down. It also utilized the Pluto, that is a 1-drop uninkable. Exert it, and it reduces the cost of the next character by 1, so you could get even more characters down really quickly. And I think the point of this deck was to basically work up your way up to Kita, where then when Kita comes down, you reduce everyone on the field by 3, meaning that if you had several locations and characters down, you're going to get like 2 turns worth of a lot of questing for lore, if they don't have any like song removal, for example. And so it was a really unique build, really cool. I was on the play in the first game and was able to run away with it fairly quickly. And then in game 2, I got to really see the deck do its thing, where you did get to, Pluto into lots of characters, lots of locations, and there were just lots of things you had to try to figure out and answer. And that one was pretty close. And I was definitely sweating, but was able to win that one 2-0. And I think the biggest learning thing for me on that one was, like the different ways you play your deck, depending on whether you're on the draw or on the play. And it's something I think, the more and more you play, the more you think about how you're going to mulligan differently, depending on if you're on the draw or on the play. And it's some of why I appreciate the build that I've been using is that it does have some great tools for on the draw games, in the right matchups, I'll say. But it's just, it's like one of those things where I think I didn't always think about that when I was earlier in my Lorcana journey myself, where now I'm seeing some of the value of some of these cards that don't feel amazing on the play if you're trying to go fast, for example, where some of these more aggressive decks, when they're on the play, they feel so oppressive because they're really built to go super, super fast, go underneath the deck that they're playing against. But then it's more a matter of when those decks are on the draw, what tools do they have to stabilize the game and try to play that catch up so that they can flip it and become more of the aggressive deck. So that was interesting. We played a game 3 just for fun. So he just wanted to play another game with his deck that he had brought in with mine, and that was he got to go on the play again, but then the deck didn't really do its thing, and I was able to win fairly quickly on that one. So I think I got to see kind of all aspects of that. How did that his deck play on the draw versus the play, when it did do the thing it really wanted to do, and then when it didn't really do the thing that it really wanted to be able to do. But it was a really unique, cool build, and this was a player actually who had been around and since the England set championship, so he actually did have one of the Stitch Rockstar cards, which I think is such an amazing card. So wish I would have been around back then to get an opportunity to get one of those, but cool to see and talk to someone who has been around a bit longer in the game than me.
Sweet. So that was round 2. Round 3, getting a Swiss round. So at this stage in the game, both Ryan and Nathaniel were 2-0, and I was 1-1. So I'll start again with this one. 1-1, I was at a stage because it was only 3 rounds of Swiss. I was basically in a win and in to get the top 8. If you went 2-1, you were like guaranteed basically top 8. If you were 1-2, you were guaranteed to be out. At that stage, I was 1-1. My opponent was also 1-1, and it happened to be the 4th that went with us, Connor. And he was not 1-1 in the 1 win, 1 loss. He was 1-1 in the 1 win, 1 tie. So his round 1 match, he split 1-1, and the games went so long that they weren't able to finish game 3. So it's kind of interesting how it shook out towards the end after our round here. Against Connor played a really fun Ruby Amethyst deck. I was very impressed with the way he built it. He built it not the traditional route in the sense of what we've been seeing with all these evasives. He added some evasives in there. He definitely had the Peter Pans with the Maui Half Shark, but he also had Super Goof and Shira Khan. So you kind of just gain lore independently based on challenging with both of those 2 abilities. So that was really fun to see. With my build, with the 1-drop Amethyst cards with Diablo and Chernobogs. With Diablo, usually you want to just quest as much as you can, because if they challenge it, you get any card out of it. Great. But with that one, I had to be more mindful of a Super Goof dropping, or if the Shira Khan was out, in a different character challenging the Diablo. And yes, I still get the card, but they also gain lore off challenging. So that was something that I had to deal with. So I'm pretty sure I lost, if I'm remembering right. Connor beat me game 1, and then I won game 2. So we went to game 3. Again, no Jafar wheels in the first 2 rounds to my memory. Game 3, Connor got to a stage where he had some difficulty on the turn 3, turn 4. I think when we were talking to Ernie about maximizing your resources and like utilizing all the ink that you have available if possible, right? His both turn 3s and turn 4s, he, based on what the cards in his hand, he wasn't able to utilize all of his ink, so he kind of lost some micro increments of tempo there. And then with that, I had genies and a lot of lamps. I ended up playing 2 or 3 lamps throughout the duration of that 3rd game. And whatever card he played, I was able to bounce back again with the lamp. So he lost even more tempo with that. So as you might be kind of gauging and understanding, I eventually won game 3 and did go 2-1, which did grant me top 8. So I made it to quarters after that round. With Connor, though, it was a little bit unfortunate. He was now 1-1-1. So the thought that we had before we even started the match was it was definitely my win and in. But if I won, Connor would still be 1-1-1, and there's a chance he could have made it in top 8 based on how the statistics work. If he won, he would have definitely made it, and I would have definitely been out. So our thought was maybe he could still make top 8. Well, his opponent in round 1, the one that he tied, came down to opponent win percentage. So the 3 opponents that his round opponent ended up playing against, the non-similar opponent of the 3 was 3-0, and I was 2-1. So the other one that had the tie against Connor in round 1, his opponent win percentage was higher, so he ended up making it 8th, and then Connor unfortunately bubbled out to 9th, which was really sad to see and really unfortunate how it worked out, because I think if they would have played a game 3, Connor might have been on the play, and I think he, based on the 2 decks, Ruby Amethyst, and I think he was playing a Steel Song. Based on how those specific builds were, I think he more than likely had the upper hand in that game 3, which is a little unfortunate. So it's really unfortunate, because this is the second time this set champ season that Connor and I have played against each other, and I've ended up knocking him out both times. So it really feels bad as a friend going into this tournament, and I know he was really looking forward to the Hero Hamada. Kind of a bummer, but he ultimately, Connor's a great guy. He loses with grace. So at that point, he was just gave us the good luck. He was rooting for us, in our Discord chat throughout the way, and throughout the stages of the knockout, and always very supportive. So that was my round 3 experience, and I was waiting for what was to come in the knockout stages at that point. So Nathaniel, who do you play against in round 3?
So when you go with a group of 4 guys to a 16-player tournament, it is inevitable that you will find your way to one another at some point. We were fortunate to not see each other in rounds 1 or round 2, but in round 3, Ryan and I were a few of the, I think we were
2 of the 3.
Two of the 3, yeah, bringing 2-0 players. So a lot of people had split at that point, or were 0-2 at that point. So, or had a draw in there. So I was against Ryan, and I looked at him, and he said, all right, so we're going to play. Because, there's a world where you could intentional draw at that point, and 2-1 is going to be top 8. Drawing, you're still going to be in the top 8. You're probably guaranteed to both then be somewhere in the top 4. But, at this point, right, to Ryan's earlier point, it's 3 rounds before we get into knockouts. We're there to play Lorcana. Let's play Lorcana. And I, based on play testing, I knew this wasn't the greatest matchup for my Purple Steel build versus the Blurple build that Ryan was running. I've tried, I think in some ways I did get a little bit in my own head, so this is also important. I think if you go in with a certain mindset into matches, you can manifest things one way or another sometimes. So if you think, oh, I lose, right? You're probably going to lose. So try not to do that. I recommend to anyone out there. Try to be positive going into it. I did get extremely close. I got to 19 in the first game. So it was really close. But Ryan, I gotta say, it felt like I could play a card and there was just an answer. So I probably did make, I think there were a couple misplays I can remember. I think at one point in our game, I had turned a Smee sideways and I really shouldn't have done that. But so that was probably one key misplay that I can remember happening. There was another game where it was a little bit of a clunky hand, where I think to that earlier point about leveraging your ink, the inkables that I had versus the non-inkables I had made it so I had to play only a single 1-drop on turn 2, and then I think I played a 2-drop on turn 3. So again, you kind of losing 2 inks worth of value against a ramp deck. That's probably a really bad thing, because they are really expanding their inkwell and using lots of ink. So that's you're kind of way behind then in a way in terms of just board and ink presence. So that didn't go great there, but I think the biggest thing I learned there is, once again, there are times where you try to make hay while the sun is shining, get your questing in when you can with a little bit more aggressive deck. But there are other times where it's important to be patient based on what's the worst thing that could happen here. So turning a Smee sideways could result in it being banished and then a Bell coming down and moving damage to your goat, which would be a nice, beautiful 2-for-1 for your opponent, which will effectively end the game. So yeah, Ryan played it, I think, as well as you could possibly have played it. He smoked me in 2 games. It was very impressive. So, give him all the props in the world. But I knew I was going into the top 8, so I was happy enough that I just was hoping that I would not be paired up with him right away, which I figured he would be the 1 or the 2 seed. I would be no worse than probably 4 or 5, so I wouldn't see him till at least the semifinal if that were to manifest itself. So, Ryan, I'd love to hear your perspective on it because I know we've play tested a bunch, so we kind of knew each other's decks pretty well, but I was able to surprise you with one small addition.
Yeah, so what Nathaniel's alluding to is in our playtesting, he was very set on not running any Bell Accomplished Mystic. And I talked to him, I think, 2 or 3 times about this. Then in game 1, lo and behold, I had damage on, I think he moved damage from an Elsa to another Elsa and cleared it. And I was like, wait, that wasn't in there before, sir. You edited this list since we last talked. So yeah, he did surprise me with the Bell Accomplished Mystic. I was still able to pull out a win in that game. As he mentioned, I was able to win 2-0, and we headed into knockouts. And I have nothing. I mean, that was the way it went. It was very nice that we got to match up in a relatively stress-free environment and just kind of play through it at a leisurely pace, knowing we weren't going to be worried about going to time. And at worst, we draw, and that's just that'd be okay too. And then we went into knockouts.
Yes. So at this stage, all 3 of us made it to knockouts. So for me, that's all I went there for. I wanted that hero, and now I have 2 to my collection. The 2 set champs that I've been to at this point for this set got the hero, and I think that's ultimately what all 3 of our goals were, to at least make top 8. So we got that. Yay us! Pat on the back. We did it.
Pats on backs.
Pats on backs. Knockout stage. We could probably sprint through a little bit of these ones here, but let's just do the quarters. Ryan, how did yours go for quarters?
Quarters, I faced another Steel Song, and that was an interesting matchup. It was more of a traditional Steel Song list, and I was able to still pull off a 2-0. I was on the play and then on the draw, so it was nice to have that kind of assured the extra insurance package of I'm on the play on the first game, so I can kind of get ahead on the ink and get ahead. And one thing I will say is that one card that came up huge for me in this knockout stage matchup was Great Stone Dragon. I was able to get it in both matches, and against the traditional Steel Song list where they're discarding my hand of resources, I'm still able to use the character cards that I'm discarding as effective resources still through the Great Stone Dragon ink ramp. And so leveraging that was major in kind of generating this massive ink advantage to the point where I knew, so my opponent had hit a Whole New World off of an Aerial that they played. So Aerial, Spectacular Singer, you look at the top 4 cards, you reveal 1 song card and add it to your hand. So I knew they had a Whole New World in hand, and I was intentionally ink dumping and card dumping out of my hand to get things out as fast as possible, knowing that this was coming, and also then targeting any Singer 5s or any 5-cost characters or above to make sure that they're getting off the board immediately. So then my opponent has to spend ink to play a Whole New World and refill my hand rather than being able to sing and then flood the board afterwards. So knowing that as my strategy, I was able to make it very awkward for him because I had a Great Stone Dragon on board, I had no cards in my hand, and anything that was removed from play or I banish any of my characters would then coming back as ink. And so it was really nice to be able to have that ink advantage leverage, where at one point he mentioned you have so much ink advantage here that I don't really have a chance, but here we go. Let's see how the RNG plays us. And he paid 5 ink for a Whole New World, and I think he had 2 left over or 1 left over at that point, and didn't actually hit a 1-drop. So at that point, I won that game pretty handily, and I was able to 2-0 that matchup as well. Nathaniel, how'd yours go?
Yeah, so I want to, before I get into mine, I think it's important to note that I think for those who kind of know some of these matchups, Blurple or Amethyst Sapphire, which Ryan was running this weekend, it's traditionally, I think we say it's a negative matchup into Steel Song. And to this point, Ryan's played 2 different Steel Song variants, and he's 2-0'd both of them. So huge props there, right? It's considered one of your poorer matchups. You played it the best I think you probably could have to perform and get the wins where needed. So double pats on backs for Ryan. I played the Steel Song player that Ryan played in the first round with that really unique Kristoff build. And, to that point that Ryan mentioned about RNG gods, right? There's a very important card anytime Purple Steel plays any type of songs deck, and it is Pete Games Referee. And boy, did I ever hit him on. I mulliganed, I think, pretty aggressively for one of the games, maybe game 2, to get him. But I got one on the mulligan, drew into a second one, and when you're able to stop them from singing and go wider than them, it is very helpful. So I miraculously won the dice roll, was able to go on the play, went pretty quick, and then just was able to Pete and repeat my way to victory in the second game. And again, there's certain cards for certain matchups. That is one of those ones where you just really want to get it in that matchup. If you can get 2 and a bounce, you're going to feel really good, and it did happen for me. So in some ways was fortunate, because if you miss that card, it can become a pretty challenging matchup. Yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Was able to get the win there. Yeah.
And with that, and then there were 2, because we get to me. This is where my demise happened. I unfortunately got knocked out at the quarters, and I lost 0-2 to the Kiwi Sapphire Steel that Ryan also played during the Swiss stage. That was a very unique build, something I wasn't prepared for. But a little bit of unfortunate, situations ended up, especially on game 1. Game 1, I ended up with the Shift Robin Hood, which was great. And then I ended up with Shift Jafar, and I had Whole New World. So I was like sitting so good. I Shift Jafar, saying Whole New World, thinking that the odds were going to be in my favor, that I would draw another Whole New World and then sing that with my Shift Robin Hood. That did not happen, and on my Whole New World draw, I drew all 4 of my Genie Wish Fulfilleds. So at that point, I had and one lamp, so that was helpful. I played the lamp and got 2 more. But then after that, he Zeused my Jafar, and then I just lost all tempo and didn't really have any more ink resources because of those 4 genies. So with that, I completely stalled. And so that happened very early. When I shift Jafar to Whole New World, I think I was only at, after that, I was only at 11 lore. So even if I would have sang another Whole New World with the Robin Hood, it would still been at like 18, wouldn't have closed the game. So something that I was aware of going into this, using this deck, is that really your goal is to really aggressively quest to 13 lore, and then if you can pull off the Shift Jafar, just do immediate closer. That move, I definitely played with my heart rather than my head. I wasn't supremely confident that I was going to win this. So when I saw that Shift Jafar in the Whole New World in my hand, I just had to play it, and it was just another sense of accomplishment that I pulled off that wheel. I'm hoping again that I'll have the double wheel. That was really what I was going for, but you know what? And so that was game 1. Game 2 was also a little unfortunate. I got to a stage where I had significant card advantage, so I had 4 or 5 cards in my deck, one of them being the Jafar, in my hand, and I was just trying to figure out how to best play it, because I didn't yet have a little Jafar to shift onto it, and I didn't have a Whole New World yet, but I had a couple friends on the other sides in my hand that I was thinking about, like trying to get that draw and lore engine in play. And I got to the stage where my opponent was top decking. But at that stage in the game, his 4 consecutive top decks, he went Alice Savvy Sailor, Beast Tragic Hero, Alice Savvy Sailor, Beast Tragic Hero, were his 4 top decks in a row, and he had 5 ink, so he was able to play those very consistently. And I just couldn't get them off the board, so eventually I just stalled out in that round, and that was it for me. I was out at quarters, but again, I got the hero, that's all I went for, and I, at that point, just became a cheerleader at that point for Nathaniel and Ryan. So that was quarters. Going into semis, Ryan, who was your opponent in semis?
A very familiar opponent, both in the tournament and then outside of the tournament. I faced Nathaniel again in the semis. So not only did we see each other once, we saw each other twice. And I wish I would have seen him in the finals rather than in the semifinals. And there's no additional prizing for him, but it would have been cool to have like a final matchup between the 2 of us. It was kind of a lot of the same story as the round 3 matchup that we had from Swiss. It was I think I actually won the die roll this time though, and so I got ahead on ink on game 1 and just kind of rolled it out and quested and got him. I think Nathaniel got up to maybe 10 at the end of the game. And then the game two, when I was on the draw, same kind of story as before, where I was able to answer things when they came down. On his side of the field, he had a few more answers and got a little higher in lore total, but I was still able to get it across the finish line before he was able to race me there. So, yeah, I don't know that there was anything unique from that matchup as well. Oh, I will say one thing that I'm grateful for is that, again, it was a relatively, mentally leisurely activity. Because it was a familiar face, a familiar opponent, and even though whether it was a deck that if he was playing Steel Song, I would have felt the same way. Of like, I know this isn't like there's going to be zero bad blood at the end of this. It's just fun in games, and we're competitive in this in the moment, and then outside of it, like that's it. It's done. Nathaniel, what was your experience in the knockout round in the semifinal?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm somewhat one of those people where once it's game time, like I'm really competitive, and even if I know it's a tough matchup, I'm gonna do my darndest to try to win. And one of the things that was happening that made me proud as a friend of Ryan is one of the ways that my deck, the way it's constructed, beats Blurple is particularly on the play. The opportunity to get a 4-cost character out and start singing along Came Zeus to really start to widen the differential between the numbers of characters that I have and the numbers of characters that he has on the board. And every time I played a 4-drop, Ryan just completely wrecked it. So I ended up having to eventually just hard cast Zeus, which feels really bad. And it was a masterclass. I think there's no doubt about it in my mind. It was like I felt good about the way I'd been playing on the day. I hadn't dropped a single game to anybody not named Ryan. So, I felt like I was playing my deck the best way it could. It was a tough matchup against a player who really knows his deck well and knows the matchup well and played it to incredible ability. So with this win, Ryan at that point on the day was 10 games played, 10 wins, many of which were on the draw, and he played 2 Steel Song, he played Purple Steel, he played Blue Steel, and he's won everything. So I think I was bummed for me to crash out in the semis for 2 consecutive set champs, but I was happy that I have now gone 5 straight set champs while getting top 8. So I have been consistent since Azurite in getting the top 8s, which feels at least a little bit of a consolation for me.
Yeah, and at this stage, I was just the cheerleader watching this match. So I stayed for the entire rest of the day, and it was... I was able to look over your shoulders to see what your hands were, and although I'm not as familiar with that matchup, Nathaniel, I just felt for you because I knew what Ryan had in his hand, and it was just so oppressive against your deck, especially that game 1, like you said, when you had to hard cast Along Came Zeus. With that, you didn't really get your early draw engine cards, so I think for you that probably felt bad because you were at 2 or 3 cards, and Ryan still had 4 or 5 cards in his hand, as well as board advantage. And the cards he had in his hand, he had 3 Elsas, the 5-cost Elsa, and so every time you played a card, he just played an Elsa, exerted it, and then he immediately took it out. So it was quite a doozy, and I could see why that matchup tends to be unfavored for you because there was nothing you could do. Ryan just kind of took over that matchup. So, but at that stage, I was like, the other side of me was like, oh, it's a bummer you two are facing each other in semis, not finals. But also it was like at least one of our group are going to make it to finals. That was kind of the other side of it too, was that, all right, let's see how we do. We're going to make it to finals. So anything else to say on this matchup?
Yeah, nicely put, Mack. And I think, if this were any set prior to this one, I think I would have been probably more bummed because it would have meant that I was 1 round away from getting a mat, right? If I had played Ryan in the finals, it would have been the same prizing for me in the end, right? I still would have gone home with just my enchanted promo. So I in that sense, right, losing in the semis is arguably feels less bad than losing in the finals with the current prizing structure, which we've already talked about in depth. I was happy for Ryan, and I was like, this guy's on a heater. Let's see him. Can he win the whole thing? He's 10-0. I mean, that is an unbelievable, string of games. I was bummed for me, but happy for Ryan. At this point, right, Mack won a set champs in Shimmering Skies. I won a set champs in Azurite Sea. Could Ryan bring home the Arcasia's Island title?
Play off the tees. What happened, Ryan, in the finals?
So as Nathaniel mentioned, I was 10-0 going into the finals. I thought my worst matchup, the one I was dreading all day, Steel Song, yes, because it's a bad matchup, but I had prepared for and practiced against it. But Red Blue Ruby Sapphire has forever and always been my like, oh boy, I really just don't want to see this because it takes so much patience, I feel like, to get through that matchup because it's like you don't want to. If you slam too much to the board, then you lose your card and board advantage at the same time when they be prepared you. And so game one, I think I overextended just a little bit too much, but also got eventually got to a point where it was, I had enough on board where I was going to quest out on my next turn, and my opponent top deck had one card in hand and top decked another card, a super goof, that it was able to gain him 2 lore, and then he had an item on field and he played a glean to gain him the final 2 lore, so he was able to reach from 16 to 20. That combination of those two cards. And so that was a little unfortunate, but also really cool to see like Glean being played in a Ruby Sapphire deck, and being able to win the game with it. And so that was my first loss of the day, and I was on the play on that game too. And so I was reeling. I'm like, oh no, I just lost all advantage in this matchup. Just don't tilt, don't tilt, don't tilt. Get back on the horse and get back. And realizing that I had overextended at one point and thought, oh, maybe I should have just held back a little bit there to have one additional answer after Be Prepared came down. That would have been a better option rather than aggressively questing at that point. The opponent was he was a really cool guy. I think he's one of the employees or owners of the store or something like that. And so really cool to talk with him and chat with him throughout the match as well. But that was a long game, and then games. I was able to win game two on the play again, and it was similarly close. I think I was in game one. Again, I mentioned Great Stone Dragon before, where when you exert it to use the item, you can place a character from your discard pile into your Inkwell exerted, and so you kind of ink ramp that way. I think I hit Great Stone Dragon pretty late in game one, and then in game two I hit it pretty early. And I was able to leverage that eventually by the end of the game into like a massive ink advantage against a red blue deck that ramps pretty hard anyways. So that felt good. And then also then the Greystone Dragon effectively was drawing me a card every time because I didn't have to ink. And so that was very, very useful in game two.
Ryan, how much ink did you have at the end of game two, by the way?
I don't even know. I don't remember the final count. It was probably close to somewhere between 15 and 20. I definitely was able to play. I know I had 13 at one point because I knew I played a Popsicle, a Hades, and an Elsa all in the same, like a little Elsa all in the same turn. But I don't remember what my final count was because I lost track. I lost track of my piles.
So there were a couple plays I'd love to call out that I think showcased your ability with Blurple and also just like the patience you're talking about in that matchup. One was where you were purposely not overextending, and you actually had Elsa, the big Elsa, and frozen 2 Maldragons, and then bounced and re-Elsa'd that same Elsa on the next turn to refreeze the dragons to like lock this guy at 12 or 14 lore. So like if Ryan didn't do this, right, the guy was going to be able to quest out and win, and he just like stalled him long enough before he could then eventually like put a Hades down when he drew into that. And it was just, that was a really cool play. And there was another play in that second game where I turned to Mack and I pulled him aside and said, why didn't he's got a quest right there. He's got a quest. And this is the patience, right? Like playing Blurple and Ryan, your ability to kind of wait and be methodical and know your opponent's deck. You knew he had Super Goof. So you knew that if you turned sideways and he was close enough with a character or whatever, because at that point I think there was an opening in the game where if he had drawn into a Super Goof and you had a character that was not evasive, turned sideways, he could conceivably quest and goof into the win. I think he was top decking or maybe had one card in hand at that point. So it would have been a very good top deck, but it would have been a losing play for you to turn sideways when, the more aggressive player in me is like, quest, come on. It was super cool. I think that was, so those two plays I think showed your ability to really remain patient and think about, I want to avoid the mistake play, or if I give him an opening, I don't want to make a losing play. I think it was really impressive to see that play out in tandem, which resulted in a game 2 win for you. It was amazing.
And you briefly mentioned the double freezing of 2 Maldragons. At that stage of the tournament, I thought that was the best play I've ever seen. But we haven't gotten to game 3 yet. And Nathaniel and I were fanboying so hard at game 3, and we'll get into this play that you did. But you played the Elsa, froze the dragons, which he would have won next turn. Then you played a fox. I think you took out a dragon, or no, and then you double froze both dragons, and then you played a second fox again, and eventually took out the at least one dragon. You might have Hades it, but either way, the double freeze was absolutely clutch, and that was definitely your winning play with that Elsa. And eventually you just caught up in lore, and that was the game, I think, for game two.
And I think I do also want to, and I know this is Ryan's match, and we're just like fanboying him up like crazy over here and
Yeah,
talking
they're hyping
over
me
him.
up way too much.
But this was, I think, another example where, if you remember back to our Ernie pod, he talked about there's board advantage, there's card advantage, there's the lore advantage, right? But the inkwell advantage that Ryan had, I mean, this inkwell was absolutely, he had no room on his playmat at this point to put his cards. It was just unbelievable, because every turn he was Great Stone Dragoning, which is a good seg into to game three. But he just had this overwhelming amount of ink, so anytime he was able to draw a few cards, he could play anything at that point. So that's where you get to do things like play a fox and then replay an Elsa, because 11 ink ain't nothing when you got 17. So I mean, it was amazing to watch that and see you in a blue mirror, if you will, right? You had amethyst, he had red as his secondary color, but a long match. There's the race to 20 ultimately is the big thing, but you used ink advantage really as your winning format. It felt like, as a spectator.
And something we haven't mentioned yet, this opponent stuck with the traditional Sisu on ice build. So there were ice blocks and Sisus, which I think against you, Ryan, specifically, is more of a disadvantage. Because once those Sisus come out, that's what happened to you also in game one, is that you completely wiped your board with a Sisu as well, with all your two strength characters. So this was something that I think you obviously adjusted very well after game one, getting used to that Sisu on ice. That's why there were the Maldragons. It was kind of that set six. It was a homage to that set six build Sisu on ice prior to the Hiram ban. But this opponent utilized it very well without Hiram. So let's move into game three.
Yeah, and I just want to one quick point on that game two game. I believe, if I recall correctly, the reason he lost the Maldragons is because I had Elsa and I had a second Elsa in hand, and I was on 10 ink, and I thought, okay, either this Elsa sticks and I get to quest with it and bounce it, or I had a second Elsa that I could follow with on the next turn, and then that one was going to be the one that's bouncing, because I was going to go to 11 ink on my next turn. And so I think what I had forced him into then was I had two Elsas and two Foxes on board, and he had two Maldragons and maybe a Super Goof or something in the back. But he had the two Maldragons, but I had enough lore on board that I forced him into a be prepared to wipe the board and reset everything again. And I think he had one card and I had multiple cards, and so if I was able to force the board reset, then I felt good going into the remainder of that game, which again was a long fest.
So yeah.
As you were building that wide ink, Ryan, great seg too, because you were drawing a ton of cards while this is all happening. Like, you were stalling him while you were building a wide inkwell, getting a little bit of lore here where you could, but you were also finding ways to draw a lot of cards, singing, just hard casting friends if you had to, whatever you needed to do to have both a wider inkwell than your opponent and a lot of cards in hand. You did. It was a masterclass in those two areas: card advantage, ink advantage. It was amazing to watch.
Felt good to play too. So game three, I open my first 7 hand and I see a Great Stone Dragon, and I thought, this is perfect. Usually my line is 1 drop, ramp on 2, 4 drop on 3. But with this in mind, and seeing how well Great Stone Dragon really gave me this huge advantage in game 2, I was like, you know what, I have to keep this. This is going to be my turn 3 play, whether or not I've ramped. So I was able to find 1 drop ramp and then Great Stone Dragon on 3. So on turn 3, I had a Great Stone Dragon down, and I knew he had Glean, but then I saw even after I played my Great Stone Dragon, he inked or something with the Glean, or he got rid of a Glean somehow. And I thought, okay, interesting. Maybe he doesn't value that as a resource for me yet. Because I had nothing, I mean, it was turn 3. I had no characters in my discard pile yet, so I wasn't using it yet, but it was there because I had gotten it out and I wanted to get it out before I lost the advantage of it. And then eventually we got further into the match, and it was like I was just ramping way faster than he could because anything that got banished off board, whether it was a trade or he was able to clear one of my characters or he B prepped me, then I had a massive discard pile of characters that I could ink as well. And not as massive as game one because I was intentionally holding things back for after Be Prepared because I knew I was never going to be able to race him in the first four or five turns. But I knew that after that, if I had enough cards and enough advantage and ink advantage, that I was going to be able to outpace him and eventually take over. And that's effectively what ended up happening. Was again, I think I had like a ink well of 15 to 20 ink, and I was able to just like Hades bounce play an Elsa. I don't know what all I was doing, but there was plenty of options for me. And the entire time, because Great Stone Dragon was inking things from my discard pile, I didn't feel forced into inking from my hand, so I could hold back resources in my hand for when I needed an answer. I could play that as an answer, rather than just having to get it on board to try to race. And eventually, we got to the point where I was able to kind of just outpace him and out haymaker him because I had way more resources. Again, I think I had 7 or 8 cards in hand at the end of the game, and he was on top deck mode, and I was in full control of both the board and the ink advantage and the card advantage.
Yeah, so I think the big difference, I guess, games 2 and 3 shook out very similarly. I think your opponent got to that 14, 15, 16, 17 lore stage, and that's finally when you got to a stage to close out the game. The difference was in game 2, he had his board state was Maldragons. He was more effective at removing your board. Game 3, while he didn't get the Be Prepared or the board wipe, but what he had was he played a Pirate's Life very early. So like that's how we got up to kind of
Two
that
Pirates Life,
higher lore
actually.
total.
He had played two
So
Pirates Life early in the game.
yeah, he played 2 actually. Yeah, you're right. So like that's how he gained his lore, and he got to that kind of that critical point where you definitely had to think about those gleans, and you had to think about those super goofs at that stage of the game, and you were much more methodical. We could tell, like Nathaniel, I could tell when we were standing behind you, that you were processing all the information. But with that, your opponent also got to top deck mode much quicker in game 3. So yes, it would have been really sad to have him top deck a super goof, but the odds of that happening were very low, and you were being very methodical. But the top deck, I think, was you were definitely in the advantage there when it came to card and board advantage at that stage of the game. You gained that much quicker than game 2. And that Great Stone Dragon, my first part is that Great Stone Dragon, I think, was your MVP of the entire match. It was the best match I think I've ever witnessed. And that Great Stone Dragon was very much the MVP in that. So that was kudos to you in teching that in, because that was incredible to watch, that you were not losing resources but still gaining ink, and that eventually is what I think helped you take over the game. So
On that Great
Nathaniel,
Stone Dragon point, sorry,
yeah.
on that Great Stone Dragon point, I do think it was my MVP of the whole day because it won me my top 8 knockout match too by having it in both of those matches as well to create this massive ink advantage, and then it won me both of the matches in the finals as well. I did have a favorite play, but I think that's what Nathaniel wanted to get into next.
Why don't you talk about it, Ryan? Because I think we
I think
probably
it's
got to
the same
find you.
thing.
We got to find you a foil stone dragon to display somewhere, because I think it kind of should go with your champion, Matt.
Please, if it's the same play you're thinking of, Ryan, because if it's this play, Nathaniel and I were like
We fanboyed
losing
hard.
We were losing our minds behind you. So let's see if it matches up.
This is something that I hadn't really encountered before in any type of testing of like, what can I do with Great Stone Dragon? What are some of the tricks I can play with it? But in my deck, I have 4 copies of Magic Broom, and I think I had like 6 ink at the time, and I had the Great Stone Dragon obviously in game 3, as I mentioned earlier. And so I had Great Stone Dragon, and I just looked at my discard pile, and I looked, and I was like, because my habit, because I don't want to forget about Great Stone Dragon, is the first game action I take on my turn is to exert Great Stone Dragon and ink something from my discard pile, so I don't forget about it at the end when I'm just like questing and like quest and pass. Like, oh shoot, I forgot my Great Stone Dragon. Crap. So I looked at my discard pile and I said, oh, is there anything in there for me to ink? Nope. And I think the comment I made was not yet, thinking like, oh, next turn I'll have it, or after like that he makes a trade, I'll have it. And then I saw in my hand, like, oh, I have a broom and I have enough ink to play something behind the broom. Okay, great. I want the draw. So broom play. I think I played like a naked, like not a naked, but a Bell Accomplished Mystic with nothing, no damage to move. So just playing the card out to get the draw. Or maybe it was a 4 cost or something. I'm not sure. But
It was the queen. The
oh,
queen.
it was the 4 cost, the Queen Jealous Beauty. Thank you. So I played the 4 cost Queen and I banished the broom to draw a card. And then I exerted the Greatstone Dragon to ink the broom. So my 1 cost was both a draw one and an ink one at the same time, which in Lorcana I think is like a, I mean, that's a 4 cost uninkable card, which is effectively 6 ink of value if we kind of, try to suss out their value structure in the game design. So this 1 cost character got me 4 or 6 ink of value in this one turn, just by being able to have Greatstone Dragon on and to draw off of it with its effect. So that was my favorite play, I think, because I found it along the way, and I didn't mean to make the comment of, oh, not yet. I'm going to do it after I banish this broom, but it turned out to look very cool from the like. I could imagine it from an outside perspective of he just made this like super cocky comment and then played off of it, which I felt a little bit bad about, but also was really proud of the play that I was able to find.
That was the play. It was so beautiful.
It was amazing. We turned and we were both like, what? No way. Like he just turned this broom into card draw plus ramp. I mean, and it was awesome. And then I think important follow up here, right? So you have this awesome turn and you get the Queen Jealous Beauty out. Super important that was the follow up card, because the next turn you exerted that queen and you took some very important actions from the red blue deck, put them at the bottom of the deck in the case that he got a Maui Half Shark. There was now going to be 3 very important actions gone. So I think that was like, it was just such a great, like, it was the clean, like the queen was kind of like the sweep up after, like, not only did I just make this really cool kind of opening turn play, but then I'm also going to use her to kind of clean up some other threats along the way while also getting 3 lore. So it was just such a cool like masterclass in getting the most out of your cards and creating so much value out of a card that would otherwise just kind of be like your, quest for 1, banish it, draw 1. But to kind of look at because we saw you go through the whole process of like looking at your discard pile and seeing no characters and then making that sequence was just, it was incredible. It was so cool to watch.
That was exactly my thought, Nathaniel. I'm glad you said that, because we definitely saw you shuffling through your discard, and I was like, shoot, this Greatstone Dragon is not going to get anything going on this turn. And then I think did you top deck that broom? That was your draw for turn. It might have been, and I don't remember seeing it in your hand, is what I'm getting at. And
I think I top decked it. But also, I thought I searched my discard after I had drawn, so I hadn't made the connection yet. That room was going to be my ink.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, we were at that point. It was only actions, and then you were kind of sitting there thinking, and then you played the broom, and then you played the Jealous Beauty to banish it and draw, and I was like, oh dang, that's the Greatstone Dragon play. And I specifically remember Nathaniel and I looking at each other, and Nathaniel, you just mouthed the words, "That was such an incredible play," or something like that, like. Such a good play is what what I saw you saying, and it was, I don't know, that was and then your next turn with exerting Jealous Beauty, because the 3 cards you put under were the 2 Pirate's Life that were played earlier, and then the Be Prepared, and so those were now on the bottom of the deck, and you really didn't have to worry about those, hopefully, unless you top decked another one. But those 2 turns ultimately are what sealed the W. And
was able to pull it out in Game 3 and went home with a championship, Matt, which feels really good to be able to say that I have one of them. I was super excited when the Hiro Hamada art came out for this set, and I was like, oh man, that'd be so cool to get on a mat, and now I have it, thankfully, gratefully. It was, I feel very fortunate to be able to count myself among the DuckTale Dad champion mat holders.
I will say too, it was really cool, and Ryan, you'd mentioned, right, like losing the first game on the play, right, and you telling yourself like, don't get tilted. I think it's just so fitting that a deck that requires tremendous patience and additional thought process into how you play the deck, Blurple specifically, right, requiring that level of patience and kind of calm, methodical type of play. It would be so fitting that you would come back after losing the first game on the play and then win the next one on the play, but then also find your way to win on the draw as well. I think it's just a great lesson, I think, for other players, myself included, to not let one game snowball, right? Is to collect yourself, use the stuff that you learned in game one in a game that you maybe arguably, like, quote unquote, like, you shouldn't lose on the play, right? Whatever. But like, it happened, but you were able to stay composed, use the learnings from that game, and leverage it into a game 2 win, which then ultimately led to a game 3 win. I mean, just, it was such a masterclass in so many, I think, critical components of playing a card game. This game, like, the elements of this game included, when we talked about ink, card, all those other advantages, but just how you are able to find your way back, because you hadn't lost a game all day, right? So you had been used to winning all day. So to lose game 1 on the play, it was incredible to see you bounce back and find your way to victory, and now a champion mat holder. Super proud of you, man. It was so cool.
Well played.
Appreciate the love, guys. Appreciate the love, and thanks for sticking around to experience it with me. To be able, so I don't have to be the only one saying like, "Hey guys, I made this really cool play." Now there's actually 2 other witnesses that are like, "Hey, yeah, he actually did make this really cool play."
Yeah, it was awesome. Congratulations. So with that, getting into that last topic, this is going to be solely for Ryan, because I know we're all very excited with this newfound hobby that we have, and I know you've been the one, Ryan, to introduce your wife to the game. So when you came home with that champion mat, what was your wife's response? How did she react? What was that like? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I actually called her when I got in the car, because obviously you can't wait to share this level of success and excitement with your significant others. Called her when I got in the car and was like, "Hey, so yeah, I'm on my way home. How's it going? How are the kids doing?" Because she's the MVP of the day, honestly, taking care of our 2 kids while I was able to go out and play a game with my friends. Her willingness to make the space for that to happen for me, I'm eternally grateful for, and she's incredible for making that happen and making it work. And then she asked how it went, because she had been following along through the Swiss rounds, but then the day got busy. Our toddler woke up from their nap, and then obviously there's not much time when you're entertaining both a toddler and a newborn to make sure that they're both alive and accounted for. And so she had not followed through the knockout rounds, and so she asked me how it went, and I said, I won. And she said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I won." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible, congratulations." So she was really excited for me. She really wanted to see what it looked like when it got home, and so we unrolled it and took a look at it. Wanted to support the local store, because shout out to Great Up Games and Toys in Maple Grove. That store was incredible with this event. They really ran a very well-oriented event, and they were very organized, and I thought it went very well and very smoothly on the whole. And I wanted to support the store even more than just showing up, so I actually bought a couple 4 booster packs on the way out, just to make sure that we had an opportunity to play Pack Rush at home when I got there. And so I did get to use the mat once already, playing Pack Rush with her at home, just to be able to say that I used it and to have that experience to really bring it full circle. But she was super excited for me. Obviously, her and I have been able to play a few times while we've been home together. Being able to share that with her is really, really special too.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. I'm glad you had that experience, and I know with your wife kind of getting into the game as well, I was curious to see what that reaction was, and that definitely lived up to it. So, any lasting thoughts here on how our week 3, our group of 4 kind of tradition that we've set out now? Hopefully, we can get all 5 of us to the next one. But any closing remarks here for set 7, set champ season?
We may have a new king of the squad in terms of who's the top player from our group. Ryan, it's you, man.
I don't know about that, guys. I don't know about that. We'll have to see how the results shake out in the future.
Definitely the new king of the hill. We'll leave it at that. So with that final remark, thank you to all of you listening to this episode. We know it was long, but it was definitely worth getting through and walking through and celebrating Ryan's first set champ victory. So congratulations again. Be sure to check out our Instagram page and YouTube channel for additional content. We're working through the editing stages of some videos that we have, some raw videos that we have created. So those will be up in our YouTube channel in the future. And again, everyone, let's get the duck out of here.